Welcome. Welcome to Wharton Moneyball here on the Wharton Podcast Network. This is Eric Bradlow, professor of marketing, statistics, and data science here at the Wharton School. And some combination of four of us. Today we have Shane Jensen, professor of statistics and data science, Adi Wyner, professor of statistics and data science, the three of us, and Cade Massey. Some of us are here every week here on Wharton Moneyball. As always, guys, we always have an open line segment, which we'll do first. As you know, we're working out some technical issues with our guests today, and we'll see if we have one. But there's a lot going on in sports that can easily take our listeners through a full hour of sports and analytics here on Wharton Moneyball. So, guys, why don't we start with, we always like to start with what caught our eye. Shane, since you're on my left, and I reread from left to right. Shane, what caught your eye in sports this week? And there could be a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about baseball, so I'll wait on that. But what caught my eye, obviously, is the Patriots and potentially having a real quarterback again, a franchise quarterback. I don't want to get too hyped up too early. We're still he's only in the second season, but Drake May was absolutely incredible. Has been incredible so far this season. He's, again, it's early to discuss MVP, but he would be in that conversation if we were to have that conversation at this point. So I guess I'm just really excited about the Patriots. They're looking like a playoff team.
Yeah, what kind of credit do you give? Obviously, Mike Vrabel, very successful coach, just took over as coach. Remind me their offensive coordinator, Josh McDaniel, right? Is back as their offensive coordinator. So I hate this. Look, I'm not trying to take anything away from Drake May, but you've got an established head coach that's a winner. You've got an established offensive coordinator that's a winner.
Well, winner. Mike Vrabel, I mean, when you say winner, Mike Vrabel is a head coach. I mean, not his overall Tennessee record. You're not pointing to, right?
I'm pointing to the fact that he's led a team to the playoffs before.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm not trying to take anything away from him. I mean, it's obviously an impossible tell. I mean, we had 15 seasons of Belichick and Brady co-observed, and people were still arguing about whether it was Brady or Belichick. I don't think we're going to ever, it's going to be hard to keep kind of deconvolve those, certainly early on in his career.
Look, we all believe in, uncertainty, right? And I think for 15 seasons for Belichick and Brady, there was obviously a very strong confound. Are you, Mr. Patriot, Mr. I love both Belichick and Brady, are you starting to at least put a small probability, given what Belichick did at New England in his last few seasons, what you're now seeing at North Carolina? Is there even a small part of you that's starting to give more credit to Tom Brady?
I've always given a lot of credit to Tom Brady. I mean, that's a softball. Yeah, I mean, all the credit in the universe goes to Tom Brady. But I mean, again, let me stop short. I don't want to take any. What the Patriots did, which no other team has ever done, kind of for the length of time that they did it, was a collab, a successful collab between one of the greatest quarterback of all time and one of the greatest coaches of all time. I do think Belichick has done more in the post collab period to kind of take away from, I guess, his whatever. But I still think Belichick's legacy is kind of set in stone based on what he did with the Patriots. Would I still hire him as a head coach? No, but I mean.
Adi, you want to jump in either on this or on, if you want to jump in on this, please do, and then you'll get your own topic.
I do want to jump in on this. I think that it's important to recognize that as a football outsider for all these years who was trying to build my knowledge base, one thing I have learned is it's almost impossible to be successful as a coach without a great quarterback. So the fact that Belichick hasn't been so successful in the post-Brady years is not necessarily that particularly damning of Belichick's talents over the years.
How do you define success, Adi? For example, I'm just making up some names. So, for example, someone won a Super Bowl with Brad Johnson. Someone won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. Someone won a I mean, I'm not saying you get to Brady's level of success. I'm not trying to compare.
Adi said great coaches, so I think there's got to be some kind of sustained success built into that. I don't want to speak for you, Adi, though.
Adi, go ahead.
No, I mean, my question is what is it? What is the information? Think of it from a posterior updating. We saw years and years of Belichick with Brady, fantastic. Right?
And we said, by the way, remember, we saw years. I know you know this, Adi. We saw years of Belichick pre-Brady too, and it wasn't that great.
Right, but the thing is that there must have been more to just Brady, to the years and years of all that success with the
Yeah, no, and I mean,
Patriots, right?
again, we kind of, I think, Eric, you talked. I mean, or we think back probably most recently to their kind of end dynasty kind of run where Brady was in God mode. In the early kind of dynastic year, you know, when they were winning very successfully in kind of Brady's
Yeah, he
very
wasn't that
early
great.
career. Yeah, Brady was kind of the game manager. He was kind of more what we regard as an adequate quarterback that was fine. And it was a world class defense, which Belichick
I'm
basically
willing to
built,
admit
that
that.
won those championships. So I mean, it's kind of, I do think we kind of in retrospect want to kind of, I certainly give Belichick a very big part of, you know, that success, especially in the early years.
The other thing to think about, and this is something very, very much a feature, I think, of football, the game changes.
Yeah.
And it does go through all kinds of shifts and non-stationarities in the way it's played. And that in some level, you may have been a fantastic coach because you've mastered the skills and in the environment of a certain era. And then if you just continue in that you slide into your old age doing that same thing, you may not have it anymore. In which case, it's not that reflects badly on the past Belichick, but this current Belichick is not going to do it in today's game.
Well, first, you guys have brought up two parts. I don't want to get to what caught your eye, Adi, but I would two parts. One is I completely agree with Shane's part, which is you have to give Belichick, at worst, if you wanted to be critical of him, which there's no reason to be, but if you wanted to be, you have to give him credit for those first few championships where Brady was not the Tom Brady of age 30 to 40 or even 30 to 45. The defense was amazing. His numbers they were good.
He was pretty clutch in the playoffs. I mean, he did
No,
win a couple
I'm
Super
not
Bowl
saying, I'm
MVPs in
just
there,
saying,
but yes, I mean, I think it was definitely, that was a team known for its defense. It
right.
would have been, you know, kind of, I guess, Russell Wilson and with Seattle type scenario.
Yeah, no,
back
I agree
there.
with that. But also, Adi, your point about the non-stationarity of the game, I think is also, it's another reason. It's not like I don't think Belichick has the energy or the mind or the, you know, age doesn't matter to me. It's not like I think he's lost his ability to coach people. But I think the point is that the game has changed in a way that he would need to significantly change the style in which he coaches to be successful today.
Right.
And that's just hard to do. That's a hard of
Absolutely.
anybody. It's not, and also it's hard to do for someone that won 6 NFL championships. And I'm not even counting the ones he won as the Giants defensive coordinator. And how many Super Bowls the man has been to, like, I don't know, half of them in the last 35 years. I don't know what the number is, but it's some big number. But Adi, what caught your eye besides the Patriots? By the way, I watched a lot of the Patriots games. Drake May is for real. But Adi, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so of course, the last time we were together, the Yankees and the Phillies were still in it, and
Yeah.
now both have been eliminated. So big questions going ahead, of course, is particularly with the Yankees, and I think the general question, the analytics revolution, if you want to condense it today and to its biggest impact factors, would be the hitting revolution that has led towards the large numbers of strikeouts, and
The
the large numbers of home
they
runs.
got 3 true outcome hitting or whatever, you know,
They call that
exit velo, all that kind of
yeah,
crap.
the 3-2 outcomes
Right.
hitting. But it's interesting because it plays off the idea that a strikeout is no worse than a regular out, which conditional on an out is true. Conditional on an out, that's true. And in fact,
Sure, that's true.
well, it's tricky because a strikeout obviously does not move the runner over. There
That's
isn't
what I
generally
mean.
a sacrifice, but it's also not a double play. So from someone who watched a lot of Stanton grounders into double plays, I'm thinking, why couldn't you strike out?
I
Right?
do think there's an analytics push against almost like against balls in play, you know, more than anything. And I
Well,
think certain teams have kind of, I think there's almost a counter push on that happen.
well, so it's interesting. You look through the Yankees, who, with the exception of Aaron Judge, which I'll get back to in a moment, which is basically awful at the plate and massive numbers of strikeouts. No two strikes approach. I mean, I want to pick on Trent Grisham.
High slugging, low batting average.
Well, that's during the season, during the playoffs. No,
Well, I mean, okay, but like,
right. So very low batting average, but also very high strikeout rates. And one of the things you noticed quite vividly in the playoffs is no two strike approach, right? So particularly with runners on, I mean, Trent Grisham is swinging for that porch with everything he has.
what is
every swing.
what is Volpe like doing? Like,
And Volpe's the same way, right? So Volpe's hits nearly, about 20 home runs.
Adi, let me ask you a question. It's not like these hitters just became who they became. It's also, to Shane's other point, it's not like whether it's Cashman or Boone can't see, these guys bat 180 against
Mhm.
really good pitching. Maybe
I mean,
that's
I
not a
think
good
over
player in the playoffs. They can see the data.
no,
These
no,
aren't
and
rookies.
I do think playoffs are mostly coin flip, but I'm starting to kind of deviate away from that. And that I do think this kind of 3 true outcome, it works well over very large samples. You hit a lot of bombs, et cetera. But I do think in the playoffs when you're only facing good pitchers and you have to kind of do stuff in high leverage kind of situations, or like, the little things seem to matter or get magnified. I don't even know. But
So
anyway, that's when a sort of a true, like, kind of hitting to contact, like putting balls in play, actually an ability to do that as a team is really helpful. I see Toronto and Milwaukee doing it.
For sure.
absolutely. I mean, one of the things we noticed about Toronto is that they were just an impossible out. I mean, 8, 9 pitches, fouling
Absolutely.
things off, and often striking out. Yes, but tiring the pitcher, putting the ball in play. But I will say, so one of the things so 2 things that caught my eye specifically in the thought around the game. First of all, is how unbelievably awesome Aaron Judge is. Let's get that out there. And I just noticed he's about the 2-1 favorite in the betting markets to win the MVP. Although one of my insiders suggested that no, Raleigh's going to win it, and you could make a strong case for either. I think in
Let me
terms
ask you
of,
a question, Adi. Do they do something for the MVP like they do for the Hall of Fame? Or no, there is no pre-ballot. It just gets announced. There is no,
well, there's no pre-valiance. It just gets announced. That's right.
just gets announced. Okay.
And I don't think anybody tells you who their vote is. But I'm not sure about that. But so it's, Judge had a season for the ages, right? So he had a probably around a 10 WAR, but just a batting line, which is absurd.
I feel like we
And
talk
Raleigh's,
about his MVP candidacy a lot on this show. It's
we
done.
do.
Don't worry about
But
it,
no,
guys. He's your guys' regular season champion. Don't worry.
No, but he had an incredible post.
He had an incredible postseason.
Yeah, he did.
And one of the things that we did see was that possibly one of the most unbelievably impressive home run I've ever seen hit. 100-mile-an-hour fastball,
Yeah.
4 inches inside.
Yeah, that was very few
Off the foul
people
pole.
could have done what he did there, for sure.
Just to have that kind of strength and speed to bring that bat around and keep the ball in fair in such a circumstance. But here's something that I'll just toss up to you guys.
Please.
I was thinking, like, what is it? I was thinking to look to see teams that are explosive in their offense. Maybe that's a strike against them to just have this sort of large variance in offense. So I thought I would rank the teams by their explosiveness, which I counted as a number of either 6 runs games or more, or 7-run games or more. I tried both, and then I ranked every team 1 to 30
You mean the
by
number
their.
of times they scored that many?
Yes, right. So it's and one of the things that struck me as unbelievable. This single counting statistic listed the top 8 teams. I've never seen that. The top 8, the 8 teams that are currently in the playoffs are the 8 teams that line up with the statistics, with one exception, depending on whether you do 6 or 7, the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now, they have a great park for hitting. They bounce around.
I'm trying to think. We're not just selecting for high scoring. Like, I feel like it's kind of explosive.
So
You'd want. Are you looking at the variance or just like the meat? Like,
no, just a number, just something trivially simple. So I would have expected that the 8 teams would be all in the top half, but they're all in the row, right? There they are.
Well, I
1
think
to
to
8.
be clear, the way just to follow up on Shane's question, what I think you're describing is that, let's say the average number of runs per game in the MLB is 4.5 or something like that. And so what you're describing is teams that seem to have a lot of games above the average amount of scoring, and therefore, by that definition, they're explosive. You don't mean I'm saying another way you could define explosive, meaning, it's how much variance is there in their runs per game. Like, sometimes they're an 11-run team, sometimes they're a 3-run team that averages to 7.
Like when I think of the Yankees, or this kind of like the bad variance that comes with like the 3 outcome approach, is like 3-2 outcome approach. It's like you hit an average of like 3 runs a game, but it's like 0 and 7, 0 and 7, 0 and 7, 0 and 7 type of thing, and the zeros really don't work well in the playoffs.
In the regular season, that's not it, because the Yankees have the fewest numbers of 2 runs or more or fewer, and they also have the most number of 6 or 7s.
So let me ask
they
you,
really had the best offense. But I was surprised that by ranking just on a simple offensive statistic, I thought that maybe the Padres would be up there, or other teams that were competitive all season long. The Cubs, they just teams that were eliminated.
I mean,
the top 8.
the Cubs were
Cubs
one of the last
Cubs
eight,
were in
but
it.
yeah.
They were in it. But the other teams that were not, the ones that were eliminated, Cincinnati, Red Sox.
You're all talking about playoff teams, though. Yeah. So they
You
were
know, I mean, I
also
thought maybe these guys would be, yeah, no, of course, but other teams, but the eight, right there in order. It was just
Yeah.
this oddity that I mean, it's probably just randomness. But I've been looking for some explanation for what leads you to the playoffs, and now secondarily, what allows you to win in the playoffs. And I think those are different phenomena. Getting to the playoffs is almost certainly unbelievable offense. Winning in the playoffs, I'm not
Well,
sure.
I think you have to be more. Yeah, I think playoffs have to be more kind of a situation. You have to have an adaptive situational approach, and I guess swinging for the fences every pitch is that they're kind of trained to do over the 162 game season. That's, I think, what I guess falls apart maybe for the Yankees specifically, or for the kind of these three true outcome teams more generally. I mean, the Yankees also have ongoing defensive problems that are
Absolutely. Well,
I mean,
guys,
humorous from my side, but need to be taken care of. Jeez.
since we're talking about baseball, we're going to do a 15-30-15 today. We've been talking open lines here for about 15 plus minutes. We do have a guest today. Unfortunately, he's only audio only, but for many of our listeners, they're doing audio on us anyway. But we're honored to be joined by Dan Szymborski today. Dan has been on the show before. Dan is a senior writer at something I look at quite a bit, which is FanGraphs. He's also the developer of the Zips projection system. Dan, welcome back to Wharton Moneyball.
Hey guys, how's it going?
It's going great. Well, not for us Yankees and Phillies fans, but in general, it's going great. Before we get into what's even going on today in the playoffs, could you just tell us? Well, I was going to start with Zips, but let's forget that for a second. What do you do at FanGraphs? Because there's so many of our listeners that want to know continuous time win probabilities, projections. What do you do? What do you specifically do at FanGraphs?
Well, if you ask people on social media, I ruin baseball with math. That's what I do at FanGraphs. But seriously, I've developed the Zips projection system, which I've used for the last 20 years. I did it while I was at ESPN at FanGraphs. That's obviously a big part of what I do, and I just generally write coverage from an analytical standpoint. I am a stat nerd, and I have been since the 80s. And that's pretty much what I do.
Well, why don't you tell us, what is the Zips projection system?
Well, Zips is a set of predictive algorithms. On broad terms, it kind of works a little like weather forecasting tools in a way. The idea of it is to get kind of an idea of where a player is and where they're going, the uncertainty around the future, because the future is very uncertain, as I can tell you from very, very many wrong projections in the past. If you've ever seen like a hurricane forecast where they show the little image of the hurricane on the graphic and that cone of ignorance that comes out beyond it, that's kind of the same thing that I do, just not quite as sciencey as meteorology.
So can you give us a sense, like, what are some of the things the Zips projection system predicts? Forget what's under the hood, forget the actual algorithm itself. Like, if I was to go onto FanGraphs, or I don't know, maybe there's a website just for the Zips projection system, would you be predicting the number of wins of a team? Would you be predicting who's going to win tomorrow's game? Would you be predicting who's going to win a series? What are the things that you predict with the system?
Well, generally speaking, the player seasonal lines, also in season, there's a simpler in season update that can be run every morning by the FanGraphs system itself. So what you see if you go into FanGraphs, you see the projection. That's kind of the median line. I do when I do the team by team rundowns, or I write an article. I get the percentiles, that things, the error, the uncertainty, because there's quite a lot of that. And the idea is just to kind of peer through the fog a bit. I also simulate teams during the season. That requires a little more work. I simulate the season a million times. There's a little bit of linear algebra involved when I do a generalized model of injuries to kind of capture that better than our kind of naive depth chart projections do. So really, if it's something I can logically model, then I try to do it. And it's more work than any sort of brilliance on my part. It was mostly effort and time.
Adi, please.
All right. Well, let's talk about projections and also reflections. Trent Grisham probably was the biggest surprise of the Yankees year. Never hit many home runs in his history, and hit 34 this year. And so what did your Zips think, and what does it think in the future for this guy?
It's funny. My editor, one of my editors, just wrote an article about the Yankees, and he asked for the percentile projection that Grisham's season was overall, and I believe it was the 87th percentile projection. Zips has always kind of liked him quite a bit. When we talk about OPS plus, that's kind of what we were talking about. But when you look at a Zips projection, I can slowly open it up and run
Wait a
one.
minute, hold on a minute. You're saying that before the season, that this year's performance would have been in the 87th percentile. This is a guy probably never hit more than one home run every 50 at bats.
Well, that was
And
for
now-
OPS plus, generally speaking, not for home runs specifically. But I am opening it, and I'll tell you in a minute.
Because I mean, I have to say, one of the calculations that we did on our show early on, I just did a simple binomial, p-value for his rate of hitting home runs mid-season, and it was in the upper tail of the distribution, maybe one and
You're saying if used his historic
200
rate as just a
Yeah.
constant P and said, what's the probability under that with, I'll make it up 300 at-bats, he'd have 22 home runs or whatever the number.
It was at least 1 in 100, and now it's way in the 1,000s. I mean, because the guy never hit more than just a handful of home runs a season, and I hit 34. I mean, wow.
But true. Sorry.
Go ahead.
But one thing to remember, of course, is we don't actually know the underlying probability. This is more of a beta binomial thing than a pure binomial thing. We don't actually know the underlying probability of what it is. We only know where he's been. We don't actually know how predictive that is as a recurring probability of that he hits a home run in any given year.
Yeah. So then the question is, how much weight do you put on the, beta distribution, which is, the prior, which you could use just the raw number of at-bats he has, and that is a rate. And then you could use the current one. So the question is...
Well, no, the question I was doing is just looking at a t-test for the difference, right? Is he different than last year?
So you're just using p-hat.
Is he a different ball player? And that's how, I mean, he seems to be too inconsistent from what he's seen in the past unless it would have to be a very small probability of it.
I'm going to use my acting as host today to move away from this dreadful Yankee discussion. Dan, let me just ask you a general question. It involves the Yankees sort of, but are you surprised at all if you had used your preseason projections? Are you surprised that the 4 remaining teams are the Brewers, the Dodgers, the Mariners, and the Tigers? And if yes,
Blue Jays.
Sorry, Blue Jays.
Yeah,
Blue Jays, Dodgers.
You had it right except for the Blue. Yeah, Blue Jays over the Tigers
and the Brewers.
It's the Blue Jays against the Mariners.
Blue Jays, Mariners. Blue Jays. The Mariners beat the Tigers. Blue Jays, Mariners, Brewers, Dodgers. Would you be surprised that those were the 4 teams? And certainly there's probably any sim would have maybe given almost zero probability that those were the exact 4 teams. But what has surprised you about what we're seeing right now?
I guess if you ask from a projection standpoint, Zips is moderately surprised by the exact 4 teams because like most systems and most people, it picked the Dodgers to win the NL West. Though I should know with a lot less certainty than most people did, or projection systems. Zips only projected the Dodgers to have a 73% chance of winning the division, which is probably lower than most people would have gauged coming into the season. It projected the Mariners to be second behind the Astros. It projected the Blue Jays 4th, but there was a lot of uncertainty in the AL East projections. There was only 6 wins separating the teams in the AL East when you talk about the win projections. It was really, really uncertain about what was going on. So it did think the Blue Jays would bounce back, but it had them at a 40% chance of making the playoffs. It wasn't going to be the favorite. They weren't going to be the favorite team to make the ALCS.
So Dan, is it fair to say the following? Since we're a stats show here on Wharton Moneyball, here on the Wharton Podcast Network, since we are a stats show, I can say you're not saying that these 4 teams, the Brewers, the Dodgers, the Blue Jays, and the Mariners, you're not saying that it has a high probability of that 4-tuple. You're just saying it's not that surprising given the width and the uncertainty of the distribution.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, no one team being where they are is surprising. It's just that these weren't necessarily the most likely teams. If you asked Zips what the most likely teams would have been, it would have been the Houston Astros. Now, it would have been surprised because the Baltimore Orioles did not come anywhere close. That is one of the larger projection misses from preseason. The other one, of course, is the Atlanta Braves. Zips would have guessed that the most likely NLCS would have been Braves versus Dodgers or Phillies versus Dodgers. So nothing crazy happened, but a lot of these events were at least moderately unlikely.
Let me ask you a question. When you think about, we all try to measure success of our forecasts. When you tend to think about whether it's the Zips forecasting system or more generally what's done at FanGraphs, like you could say, well, we got the Braves wrong, or we got the Astros. The Braves didn't even make the playoffs. So, like, do you think about like as you're thinking about developing your system, do you literally think 0-1 loss, like wrong's wrong, or do you think, wow, the Orioles, wrong is really wrong?
Yeah, and actually, just to follow up on that, because I was
Please.
thinking a very similar thing to Eric, I think. Like, are there particular teams or like sort of circumstances? Like, I mean, obviously the system's going to miss every year, so it's got to miss something. But like, are there kind of either teams or types of teams, or like, is it error prone in some way that you guys haven't been able to kind of get at yet?
The problems tend to be less bias and more accuracy. Accuracy, of course, is the hardest thing to pin down. Once you've had so much experience projecting things, you kind of can get a pretty good idea of if there's certain aspects that that teams are systemically being overrated or underrated. For example, if teams with a high percentage of fast players is being consistently underrated, then you kind of have an idea, and from the data, however you choose to do that, any kind of dimensionality reduction of any kind of model. So there isn't really most of these easier low-hanging fruit things have been picked, which is why you see most good projection systems tend to cluster around each other pretty well with accuracy, because the easy stuff is done, and now we're kind of in very, very small difference territory.
I have a question but Shane, I saw your hand up, please.
Well, I guess just to kind of follow up on that, because I mean, I totally I get what you're saying. Like, I guess what spurred my question is, I wouldn't mind your thoughts from somebody who like looks at the data quite a bit. How are the Brewers doing what they're doing as like kind of a bottom payroll team? Is like, is there something kind of like that? Is it? How are they doing what they're doing?
It's funny that one of the things because people ask about this with the Brewers, because they're actually the team that's had the least accurate projections over the last 5 years, is that if you look at the player projections, they actually aren't systemically missing low on the Brewers, but the team projections are. And what I've deduced is that the biggest problem with projecting team standings with the Brewers, at least for Zips, I can't speak for any other projection system which has had the same problem, is that I am doing a poor job projecting who the Brewers will actually use. For example, Zips gave a very positive projection for Joey Ortiz in his rookie year, but I wasn't convinced that they were going to go all in with him last year. Isaac Collins had a decent projection this year, and I was very conservative about how many plate appearances I gave him in the majors. It seems that I'm underrating the Braves more than the projections are, and that's kind of a problem when you're doing something like team standings, because a model such as this is not going to be able to really do a great job figuring out who will play.
Yeah, and I mean, you couldn't have known Andrew Vaughn would go there and do whatever he's been doing as well.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps someone can more accurately model decisions that general managers and coaches are making with setting the lineups, but that's not something that's in my skill set. At least I haven't figured out how to cross those problems with any meaningful way.
So Dan,
So
let me ask you a question that I'm channeling my inner Shane Jensen here, even though Shane is here. So this is, by the way, the odds I'm about to tell you are before last night's game. So my understanding is if I got this right, I even got the team draw. Seattle beat Toronto last night, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they beat him. Okay. But this is before last night's game. How can you explain any team? Shane can jump in after you. The Dodgers were plus 120. And let's all be clear. There's 4 teams left. That essentially gives them double the probability of the average team left. How would you explain that? Like, does that, Dan, maybe that seems normal to you. And the Brewers, by the way, are plus 850, which gives them like, 1/8 the probability or 1/9 the probability, which is, a quarter what they should have roughly. Or, how would you explain that? And do you think there's enough precision, or is that just way too out of line?
Well, of course, one of the fundamental things is that bookmakers are also seeking to maximize how much money they earn. And there's obviously going to be a great deal of correlation between the one true underlying probability, the wisdom of crowds, and where they set these things. But all I can do, I mean, is my work. And Zips at least is less sanguine about the Dodgers.
So what does it have the Dodgers win probability at right now?
Right now? It has the Dodgers to get past this round. It only has the Dodgers as 54-46 over.
Yeah,
that's very different.
Let's pretend like Shane's not here. Shane would agree with that. So they can't have, and then the win the World Series, I don't know, let's even give them 54 again.
Yeah, right. Actually, Dan, since you're talking about that 54-46, and you've been doing this obviously for many seasons, is that even unusual? Because, I think most people would kind of naively look at the Dodgers Brewers as kind of a just based on persona, like a real kind of mismatch. 54-46, is that about as much as you stretch away from 50-50 for like once you get to something like the conference series, or like historically after you've done this, is that like a big spread?
I'm working from memory here simply because I don't have one easy to access spreadsheet, but I don't believe that any of the championship series have been at least 60-40 or if they are, it's been very close, like maybe 61-39. Generally speaking, I mean, teams in baseball are very, very close. It's not like the NBA. I can't think of the paper right now who the three analysts who analyzed best of 7 series and the NBA and estimated that for MLB to have the same record of better team advancing as the NBA did, that they would have to play something like best of 76 series.
I think that was Michael Lopez who did that.
Yes, that's it. I couldn't remember.
He basically said, I mean, listen, because there's so much more spread in the NBA, you don't need that many games to resolve who's better. But because the differences in quality in any given game in MLB are much more compact, you need way more games to
or not even any given. I mean, certainly the spread, I mean, in any given game, I don't know, you'd probably go above 60-40, but by the time you get to the conference series, you're selecting for teams where I would doubt. I mean, I'm not surprised to hear 60-40 is kind of the limit of what you'd kind of differ from the coin flip. Of course, I wouldn't go beyond 55-45.
Oh, wait, I'm going to play the game with you, Dan, that I always do with Adi and Shane. So, Dan, let me do it with Shane and Adi, and you just listen on, then I'll get your comments. So, guys, we just heard 54-46. I'm going to give you another piece of information, and you tell me how this would move things, if at all. The Brewers were the best team in baseball. They were, and they had a better record than the Dodgers. Does that move your probabilities at all? No. All right, how about this?
Over an even schedule? No.
Okay, how about the following? The Brewers were 6-0 this year against the Dodgers.
No.
Adi, is that worth anything to you?
Yeah, I think that's worth a little bit, tiny bit, but a little bit. I mean, the real question, Shane, is it nothing or is it? I think it's worth a percentage point.
Yeah, I guess, again, when I think about Dan, I want to hear what Dan has to say first.
Yeah, Dan, what's your thought? Is that worth any, like, I'm not saying it should. You heard Adi and Shane say if it has something, it's tiny. Is there somewhere in the ZIP system that has the fact that the Brewers are 6-0 this year against the Dodgers?
Well, directly, no, but that's not necessarily right. That's just something that it's probably too small for me to model in a meaningful sense, because Zips is trying to get the underlying reasons why a team might be better. But I can't say it doesn't really move it at all, because Thomas Bays will come back and come out of the grave and punch me in the face.
Right, of course, it has to move it a little, some way. The question is by how much. I mean, listen, Toronto was a beast against the Yankees all season, and they beat them in the playoffs. And I mean, sometimes the teams are. I mean, we have a hard time putting our finger on exactly what it is, but there are archetypes of players and pitchers and game styles, and
yeah, and I guess
it must matter a little bit. And we have some revealed information.
If I told you again, let me frame it a different way. If I told you that Team A was 6-0 against Team B, I'm not going to tell you who the teams are. Team A had a better record in the regular season than Team B. Team A and Team B are part of the last 4 teams remaining. Team A and Team B are playing each other. And Team A is plus 850 and team B is plus 120. You'd be like, there's some splaining to do here. I mean,
Yeah.
somebody would say something about something seems miscalibrated. Dan, let me give you the first comment on this. On my simplistic analysis, I'm stripping off the names of the teams. I'm just giving you the data from this season. It must be because, and Adi's told us this before, if you correlate payroll with winning, it's very correlated. If you look at priors, obviously the Dodgers had a much stronger prior than the Brewers. Is there some other explanation I'm missing?
Not necessarily, at least one that I think that a model can actually meaningfully address, because these generalized models are very useful. But again, we're talking about all models are wrong, but some models are useful. And there might be something that, let's say there's this particular style issue that causes the Brewers to have a better record against the Dodgers. Even if we on some level can feel that, I'm not sure we can necessarily isolate it, because it's hard to isolate these reasons for things. It's what I always tell people coming into the season about a projection is that if a player hits 300, or I project a player to hit 300 and they actually hit 300, I still don't actually know if I was right. I still don't really know if they were truly, that was the underlying probability in any given at bat was 30%, or if they were actually truly a 27% hit guy who got lucky, or a 33% guy who showed real decline. So you never really know the real answer in a way. I mean, there's lots of tools to evaluate our conditional probabilities, but I don't necessarily think that it's in the gut. I hate to use the word gut, but there's just some little nudge here and there that models necessarily can't really pick up super well.
Let me ask you one last question, then we'll kind of let you go here. What do you see happening? There's a lot that could be going on in the off season, but like, is there any player when you look at their prior on what FanGraphs or the Zip system might project for them, and now you look at their posterior because the 2025 season, let's forget the playoffs just for a second. The 2025 season is over. What players, if any, have moved the most between your prior and posterior? Like who, and possibly who may cash in on that in free agency? Those could be independent questions, but I'm just wondering, who have you updated the most?
Pete Alonso has actually improved quite a bit when you look at he's kind of arrested a gradual decline. But it's interesting in a way, because I still don't really have a real good feel. I mean, I've talked to agents on this issue of just how much his market has recovered. Because last year, Zips was actually pretty close on the contract he eventually got with the Mets. And I was really, really surprised by that. I thought, oh, Zips is going to miss by like $70 million on him. And it didn't. And I was a little confused by that, because there's certain things you expect to be wrong about when there's the vibes. And I think he's going to get a bigger contract than he did last year. Also, there's no free agent compensation attached. But when he's talking a 7-year deal, as he has initially, I don't know if it's recovered that much. So I'm really fascinated to see what actually happens with his contract this offseason. He'll do better, but I would be really surprised if he got 7 years. But I've been surprised before.
Just maybe, actually, while we have you, might as well do you have any, stated projection? Maybe you've made it already on how you see the playoffs going?
Yes. Zips actually likes the Mariners before the game. Obviously, it likes them better now. Right now, Zips has them at seven, as Mariners at 72-28 over the Blue Jays, and then the Dodgers 54-46 over the Brewers. It has, depending on what the matchup is, if we just look at Blue Jays Dodgers, Dodgers go up 55-45. Zips actually likes the Brewers a little more than the Blue Jays. But there's a lot that could go wrong for a team in that 45%.
Well, Dan, we'd like to thank you for joining us here on Wharton Moneyball. We've been talking to Dan Szymborski. Dan is a senior writer at FanGraphs, the developer of the Zips projection system. Dan, as always, thanks for your insights, and thank you for joining us here on Wharton Moneyball.
Always fun. Thanks for having me.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Wharton Moneyball, the Wharton Podcast Network edition. Today's been an interesting show in the way we've taped it. We had 15 minutes of open segments, of which Shane was going on appropriately about potential of Drake May and the New England Patriots. Adi was lamenting, as he has a right to, about the Yankees and the high volatility, and a little bit about Trent Grisham. And then, of course, for the last 25 or 30 minutes or so, we've had Dan Szymborski on. Dan is a senior writer at FanGraphs, the developer of the Zip system. So now we're going to go back for the last 15 or 20 minutes to the open line segment here on Wharton Moneyball. I'll go next. So I'm going to go to tennis because everybody knows I love tennis. And this was crazy what happened in tennis. So just to remind all of our listeners here on Wharton Moneyball, there are multiple levels of tournaments in professional tennis. Everybody, of course, knows the majors, right? There's Wimbledon, US Open, French Open, Australian Open. You might as well call those 2,000 level events. The reason I'm using the number 2,000 is if you win them, you get 2,000 points. Then there's the one that's just below that, of which there's about 8 or 9 in a year, and those are called Masters 1,000 events. Notice it's half, but 1,000 points is a lot in tennis. Then there's what's called the ATP 500 events. Then there's even 250 events. Notice I'm having, there are 125 events, but the major players don't really play in them. Those are the major level events. So there are players that you guys know, many players that you guys know, that have never won a Masters 1000 event. It's actually quite hard, especially now. Like for 20 years, you are going to have to beat at least one, if not more, of the big three, because they're all, and I'll include Andy Murray and Stan Wawrinka and other guys, because they're all playing the Masters 1000 events. And now, of course, you have Alcaraz and Sinner. And so that's not going to be easy. And Djokovic is still playing, so you're going to have to beat one of those guys. Well, I don't know, Adi, if you saw this.
I did not.
Okay. What would be, I know Shane has, what would be a surprising ranking? Like, how low a ranking do you think you could get for someone to win a Masters 1000? Let me just give you a piece of information. Alcaraz chose not to play in this one, so that helps. He did not play in it. He had won just in China. He won a 500 event in China, tweaked his ankle a little bit, decided not to play in this Masters 1000. Sinner played, but had to retire in the second round, injured. Djokovic played in the event. But, like, what ranking do you think someone who could win the event might be? Like 20, 30, 50? What do you think?
All right, so we actually discussed this not too long ago with one of our tennis guests,
Okay.
and my hypothesis was that there's still a lot of dominance outside of the top three relative to the bottom of the half of the top 20. But our experts seem to think that that wasn't the case, that you really get tremendous dominance at the upper top, and then it levels out. So I think probably 20 in a Masters event, I would say.
Yeah. The number's 204.
Oh my God.
The guy that just won, Valentin Vachereau, was ranked number 204 in the world. He beat Holger Rune, who's number 6. You may have heard of him. He beat Novak Djokovic. You may have heard of him. Yeah, you may have heard of him. And then, interestingly, he played his first cousin, who's ranked about 50 in the world. This guy, Rinderknecht. They're literally first cousins. They're sisters or mothers. They played each other in the finals. Rinderknecht had beaten 5 seeded players to get to the finals, but a person ranked 204 won a Masters 1000 event. Now, let me just say, he's now ranked number 40 in the world, just to show you how much 1,000 points will get you. And of course, I say this is life-changing, not just because of the $1.2 million he gets. It's twice the amount he had won in his entire career. And the guy's 26. He's not 18. He's 26. It's twice the amount he had won. But he now gets into every event. So he gets into every major. He gets into every Masters 1000. He gets into any 500 event he wants. He doesn't have to go through qualifying, which, by the way, he wasn't even in qualifying for this. Just let me remind you guys, for a 128-person event like this, they let usually like 110 people in based on rankings, and the last 18 have to play their way in. He was an alternate. He wasn't even in the list of people that could play their way in. If somebody dropped out, they just had some local guy who was kind of around.
This would be like would this be like an amateur winning the US Open? Like
Yeah,
the analogy in
I
golf,
mean,
like
golf.
would it
In
would
golf?
like in golf. I'm trying to kind of give an analogy to like, because
I
that's
don't
something at least we've seen amateurs come on and
compete.
do well, like, I kind of feel like
All right.
I don't know if
I
that's
don't
the right
think
analog
I
or if
don't
it's
think
even more rare. What just happened is even more rare
but
than
just so you
that.
know, Adi, no Masters events have been around for about 30, 40 years. This is
Never.
the lowest ranked to ever
All
win.
right. So I have two remarks. First of all, golf has more variance, way more variance than tennis. You have the putting randomness, which is unbelievable, and can make a huge difference. So I would have imagined that amateurs have won professional tournaments in golf rarely, but
No,
every
the
now and then.
last amateur. There,
This is
there
the
have,
U.S. Open, though.
yeah, there
Like,
have been amateurs
but
that have won professional golf events, but I don't think if an amateur's ever. Well, Bobby Jones in 1920s won the major.
no,
But
yeah, I mean, I'm more recently. I
but
feel
don't
like
think
every
so.
few years there's an amateur that like, I mean, of course, the amateurs aren't going to be playing in the Masters or whatever. It's kind of a it's
Well, it's
the
actually not
conditions for
true.
this to happen are pretty rare.
The person that wins, there is an amateur championship. That person automatically gets to play the Masters. So actually, there are two, and there's like a couple others. Like I'm making up the South American Amateur Champion. There are 3 or 4 people that amateurs that do get to play the Masters every year.
So the real question about this is what as a let's be Bezos, but what's my posterior? I would imagine that we misranked him in some way.
Yeah, well,
going into this.
I was going to ask, like, what was his
Right.
trajectory before he got to 204? I don't know how far but if this guy was
But
just
he was
on like this
26,
like crazy ascent or
So
something.
he'd been playing for years, and yet he's still. I mean, this doesn't make sense. Tennis is a game with lots of ladders of
Lots of
levels of quality. 204 is nothing like a 50 usually. Nothing like, and 50 isn't like 10. So that's a lot of ladders to jump. And
Well, I can tell you,
know,
I'm reading it right. This is look. I know you guys have some skepticism of AI, which you should, but here's some data from AI. So, he's increased steadily. In January of 2022, he was in the top 500 in the world. Then in January of 2024, he was in the top 200 in the world. And then by May of 2024, he had reached 116. That was the highest he had ever gotten. Then he slipped back down to 204 because of injuries. So that's it. That's his entire.
All right. Well, at least he had been 116, and he had a pretty strong improving trajectory, which was set back by injuries.
So
maybe he just had like a long term kind of like some kind of injury. Like we're looking at him post some like correction that really made a huge difference.
No, Adi, you're doing something that a good Bayesian would do, which is that, look, we can't refute the data. He won. Now the question is, what's an explanation for it? You've given a couple. One is the distribution of talent is really, really flat. We don't really believe that, but that is one possibility, right? Another possibility is his true ranking is not 204, and that, had he not been injured for part of 2025, maybe he would have been 50 or 60 in the world. Now, that still would have been unlikely, but not the 4 sigma unlikely or more we might be talking about here. And this is what scientists do. You come up with alternative hypotheses, some of which are more plausible than another, and this one seems quite plausible.
Can I ask a sample size question in tennis, Eric? Because you know these ranking systems better. Like, how many now tournaments in a row of like first placed, like first round exits would he have to pile up? You said he's now at 40, or somebody said he's like at 40 in the world now.
He's at 40.
To knock him back down to 200. How many bad performances does he like? How much was this performance worth in kind of like and sort of in the almost like, I guess, the inertia of the ranking system?
Well, I'll give you an example right now. That's a great question. Here's what I can tell you with certainty. He cannot go below for the next year. Let's assume that the number of points are fairly stable across the different rankings, right? So he pretty much can't go below about 50 in the world or 55 because that 1,020 points he has stays on for a year.
Yeah.
So even if he gets 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and remember, he's not going to play 51 weeks, but he's going to have that many weeks of opportunity to get, because he's in every tournament he wants to play. So it would take a long time now for him to drop because it just happened and it stays on for a year. He's changed. That's what I meant when I said he's changed his career. Like, even if he has a bad year, he's probably going to stay in the top 100, which will also get him into tournaments for another year. And I hate to say it, the guy's 26, he ain't 18. Maybe he's not. Yeah, everyone says, well, Djokovic plays till he's 38. Yeah, right. Okay, well, Pete Sampras played till he's 31. Most players are done by 27, 28. This guy has changed the last 3 or 4 years of his career for sure. And that's amazing.
Yeah, that's a
Adi, I
great
see your
story.
hand up, please.
Yeah, well, I was actually one of the things we actually kind of touched on it a little bit. That the tennis ranking systems in particular have a lot of sort of built-in randomness that are due to decisions to play certain tournaments and not play them. They're not really what you would call power rankings,
They
which
have
is
both. They have the live rankings, which tend to have a smaller window to them, and then they have the one that I just described to Shane, where the points stay on for a certain period of time.
right. But I'm curious to know what what
an ELO system would do with
an
something like
ELO
this.
system or just someone's power ranking, a regression based forecast that says this is how good we really think you are. And I would imagine that his 204 was probably quite different from what his power ranking or ELO based or whatever system.
Like
you
what
use.
residual would that have in like an ELO or something like that? Yeah. No, that's a great
And
question.
this is actually interesting because this is one of the problems with these systems is that it sometimes takes into account lack of play, or a new player when he comes online. We don't know what to do with him, so we give them often a very low score.
Well, here, I can tell you right now, again, this is not, I can't see the number based before this tournament, but I just went to the ATP rankings, which is an ELO-based system, tennisabstract.com. I've talked about them before. It has Vachereau, this guy, at number 43. Now, that's not very far from his other ranking, but how far that let me click on his name. Let me see if it has a time series, and let's see how far it probably does. Hold on a second here. Well, if I'm reading this right, I may be reading this wrong. Fans here on Wharton Moneyball, no, it had him at 204. It had him like at 200. I assume. Oh, I don't know what. I don't know what V rank is. So maybe this is different. Maybe his rank was different before this. Oh, I see. So it's actually changing his ranking. Oh, this might be his opponent's rank. I think these are his opponent's ranks. No. So that's just who he beat. Well, let me just tell you. According to the ELO system, in the round of 64, right, he beat the 82nd player in the world, then 17, then 23, then 31, then 11, then 5, and then 54. That's
so
not
crazy.
bad.
Like, well, again, player A, player B, if one was at 20 and one was at 200, what would you say the odds were for a single match?
About 95% at least.
The first thing that came into my mind was 99%. I was thinking there's a 50% chance that the 200th player in the world beats.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, there's no way he was an actual 200 going into that tournament.
We've definitely
what Adi's
rejected
doing
the null hypothesis that he's a ranked.
Yeah, well, that's what I was about to say, Shane. For our listeners out there, Adi's computing the p-value under the null. Adi does not believe, as he said many times in 11 and a half years, that 1 in a million events happen. And so there's no way the 200th ranked player beats 5, 6 players in the top 20. Not no way, but like with very, very small odds. Therefore, you have to then say maybe the null of him being 200 is just not true.
Yeah. I mean, the question is that should you have revised it in the middle of the tournament, right? I would have.
Well, that's another thing.
Start laying bets after that first round or something like that.
Yeah.
Also, once he beat Djokovic at that point, I don't know. I mean, I understand Djokovic has good days, bad days, but even the bad Djokovic is still pretty darn good. And so,
so Eric, let me ask you a question because you go to a lot of tournaments and watch a lot of tennis. Are you able to see with your eyes when you're watching two players that one is substantially better skilled than the other, as opposed to just looking at the score?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me tell you what you can tell. You can tell a lot about who's hitting the ball harder because it's just the speed off the racket. You can also hear the difference. That's what I do, Adi. Sometimes I'll close my eyes and I'll try to guess which side is hitting the ball. You can see that. What you can also see, and this is where I can see that Djokovic, I understand now. Look, we can get tennis experts. At some point, we're going to have Paul Anacone on. He would answer this as well. One thing I know for a fact, and the data would suggest this, that Djokovic is doing worse, is what they call getting out of the corners, which means his opponent hits the ball deep into the corner. Historically, Djokovic would stretch, hit the ball back, and be back at the tee, be back at the center. He can't get out of the corners now, because for him to stretch out far enough to get to a ball, by the way, same is true for squash. The best players get pinned in the corners, but come out of the corners fast. Djokovic, just at his age now, it's movement. It's not that he can't hit the ball hard, and it's not conditional on him getting there. He doesn't hit as good a shot. He does not get to the ball. He's a step slower out of the corners, and that means everything in the world of tennis. The answer is yeah. That's the wonderful thing about tennis. There's things you can do that at the live event, you can tell who's hitting it harder. You can tell who's moving better. You can tell who's able to recover from being in a defensive position more. All of that is available. And motion tracking data would be able to answer all of that. Well, guys, it's been kind of an hour here on Wharton Moneyball and the Wharton Podcast Network. It's been a great show today with 15 minutes of open segments. I don't know how much baseball we're going to be talking about now, since we know the Red Sox
yeah,
are out,
the team's
the
been
Phillies
knocked
are out.
out. You're not going to be paying attention. I'm going to be talking baseball for the next couple of weeks.
All right. Well, we'll talk some baseball, but I think we got to talk some NFL today. We got to talk about the Patriots. We didn't even get to talk about the 5-1 Bucks, who have the best quarterback in the NFL, Baker Mayfield, right now. We didn't get to talk about that, but we got to talk with Dan Szymborski about the ZIP system and projections for the season. We got to talk about tennis. So lots of great stuff. So on behalf of myself, Eric Bradlow, on behalf of my co-hosts today, Shane Jensen and Adi Wyner, on behalf of Cade Massey, who will be back next week, thanks for joining us here on the Wharton Podcast Network, here on Wharton Moneyball.